Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. It's episode 472. We've got a great special guest. We've got Craig Hewitt, and he's the founder of Castos, which is a podcasting platform that allows you to publish your podcasts. And I'm all into podcasts. And I've got my great co-host, Adrian, as well with me. Adrian, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to listeners and viewers?
Hi, everyone. My name is Adrian. I'm the CEO and founder of Groundhog, and we build marketing automation plugins for WordPress.
And Craig, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, so I'm Craig Hewitt. I'm the founder of Castos. We're a podcast hosting platform and also the owners of the Seriously Simple Podcasting WordPress plugin, which is kind of why I'm here talking about WordPress tools. Yep.
And Craig is based in France, and we seem to have a slight time delay, listeners and viewers. So if there's a slight pause in the conversation, that's because he's across the Atlantic communicating using the amazing technology of the modern age, pigeons probably. Before we go into the main interview where we're going to be discussing why he developed Castos and why did he decide to use WordPress as a SaaS platform, and a couple of other great questions, I want to talk about our major sponsor, which is Kinsta Hosting. Now, if you're looking for really quality hosting for yourself or for your clients, i.e. for WooCommerce, or you've got a membership website, I suggest that you go over to Kinsta. We've been with them for over 3 years. They host the WP-Tonic website. It's been a really fantastic to host with them. And also they've been sponsoring the show for 3 years. And I just got to say, when I have to log into clients hosting providers, and it's a different interface to what I'm used to with Kinsta, you soon realize that you can't go back after you've used Kinsta because the actual interface is tremendous. You got like one-click backup, a host of features, and it's so easy to use with the interface that Kinsta provides. Another factor is that you use the Google platform, so you get some of the best infrastructure on the market at the present moment. And thirdly is their support. It's 24/7, but it's of such a quality compared to a lot of the competition that you really can't compare it. So if that sounds really interesting, go over to Kinsta and look at one of their packages for yourself or for your clients and buy. And the main thing is, if you decide to do that, is also tell them that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic show. So, Craig, let's go into the interview part. So what led you to develop Castos? You know, what led to the spark that led you to decide to go down this windy road?
Yeah, so I've been in the podcasting world for almost 5 years now. I have my own podcast that's 210 episodes long or something like that at this point, and saw an opportunity for kind of another player in the podcasting space specific to WordPress when the Seriously Simple Podcasting plugin that we now own came up for sale on the market. The original creator of the plugin, Hugh Lashbrook, went to work at Automatic and needed to kind of divest himself from any side projects and things like that to be able to focus on his work at Automatic. And so the plugin, which at the time was just a free plugin, there were no kind of premium add-ons or any kind of monetization at all, came up for sale, and I bought it. And from there, we built the Castos hosting platform that connects into the plugin. So you can manage all of your podcasting content from your WordPress site, you know, the same pace you manage all the rest of your content, but your files are hosted on a dedicated podcast hosting platform, which is the Castos platform. So we manage both the plugin, which we acquired and had a user base of, you know, something like 15,000 active installs, and then we built the hosting platform that integrates with it.
So before I throw it over to my co-host Adrian, what are some of the main features or the main things that if somebody's looking for to host their podcast that makes you more suitable than some of the other competition then, Craig?
Yeah, I think the the big differentiator for us is obviously like our WordPress integration. So, there's only one other player in the market that has an integration with a plugin directly like we do. We think we do things a little bit better than everybody else. And I think we're really active both in the WordPress community and in developing the plugin for free users that don't use our hosting platform, because it is surely optional to use our hosting platform. But just the suite of features that we have within the plugin itself, I think is really kind of second to none. And then I think on the hosting platform side of things, you can use Castos with WordPress or without it. You can use it as a standalone tool. But we've built a lot of extensibility to the platform to kind of repurpose your content and allow you to promote your show more easily. So we have integrations with tools like Headliner to create audiograms. We do YouTube republishing, so you can take an audio only recording, convert it to a video file, and publish it automatically to your YouTube channel. And we have things like automated transcription. So without having to upload a file to something like rev.com or Timmy, you just publish your podcast episode, we transcribe it, automatically spit back that transcription file to your dashboard in a few minutes. And so all these kinds of things are ways to repurpose and extend your podcast content without you doing a whole bunch of extra work, because all these things exist on their own, but we've done a lot to automate them. So Adrian can probably appreciate the power of automation, and you as a podcaster or a content creator not going to a whole bunch of trouble to repurpose or extend your content. It's all done automatically so that you as the content creator can go and focus on the higher value, higher leverage things that only you can do.
Oh, it sounds fantastic. Over to you, Adrian.
So you mentioned that while we were talking about why you developed Castos, you mentioned that you started elsewhere, that you have your own podcast. I'd love to know just a little bit about your story and your journey up to becoming what is essentially at this point a product developer, and the transition from podcaster to product maker. Yeah, it's an interesting journey. I definitely don't. So I'm not a developer. I don't have a technical background. I have an engineering degree, but not a developer background. And so my role really is as a product person, I would say. So at this point, I consider myself like our chief product officer, I guess. With big ideas in
of
UI.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's really important, because I think it's good developers are really important. Good designers and UX people are really important, but to have a person that has a lot of domain knowledge to guide, the ship, if you will, to say, this is what we need to build. And maybe we're ahead of the market. Maybe our customers aren't even asking for this yet, but if we build this, they're going to say, wow, this is like the best thing ever. So there's like the Henry Ford thing of saying, like, if he asked people what they needed, it would be a faster horse, right? But what they really needed was a car. They just didn't know it yet. And so I'm certainly not Henry Ford, but I like to think that, I've been podcasting for 5 years and have kind of done and seen a fair amount. And so I think I know what a lot of people that are podcasting want and need. And hopefully we've built a tool that kind of meets that need.
So were you an entrepreneur like first, or like a podcaster first, or I'm just curious at like where it started?
Yeah. So my podcast is called Rogue Startups, and it really started when I was, what like a lot of people call a wantrepreneur. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was working a day job. I didn't have an idea. I didn't have a business, but I just really liked the space. I liked listening to other podcasts that talked about online business and software and things like that, but I hadn't really started my journey yet. And I think that's kind of typical. Like, I think there's a lot of people that are scared to quit their day job. In the US, there's things like healthcare that are really big questions that you have to go figure out on your own. But people are interested in the space that might never like get started down that road. And that was me. And I landed on my first kind of business as an entrepreneur through the podcast and kind of some of the things I learned there. But yeah, I definitely started as an entrepreneur and then kind of grew into, the business that I run now.
Awesome. Jonathan?
That sounds great. So, the other question I was going to ask you, why use WordPress as a SaaS platform? I'd imagine because, when you were telling us you bought this plugin, but I suppose it still doesn't necessarily mean that you would have to build the SaaS on WordPress. So I'm interested in first of all, is it built on WordPress? And secondly, why did you decide to use WordPress?
Yeah, so our marketing site is definitely on WordPress. So Castos.com is definitely on WordPress, hosted with Kensta. And I agree that they're wonderful. They're our fourth host that we've been with, and I'm very particular, and they've been absolutely wonderful. Yeah, so our marketing site, Castos.com, our podcast, posts and blog and marketing site is all on WordPress. The application that drives the hosting platform is built in Laravel, so PHP. And we did that just because I think it's a little more customizable and extensible than WordPress. But we definitely looked at using WordPress and things like user management and concept of posts and things like that to build the SaaS app. But ultimately decided on kind of rolling our own solution.
All right. Over to you, Adrian.
So how long has Castos been around now?
Right at 3 years.
Right at 3 years. So in technology years, that's a good long while.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'd love to know if there's as a product maker myself, I'm in and around probably just over a year, maybe a year and a quarter into my own product. And then I had another product before then. So like total years of being a product maker, probably around like 3 or 4 like yourself, although not nearly as large. I'd love to know what your kind of like biggest experiences or biggest learning opportunities out of like, being a podcaster, becoming a product maker, and then that kind of like becoming seasoned over the years. What are some of the biggest things that you've learned that you think other product makers might find useful?
Yeah, so I'll talk specifically to non-technical founders. And I think that might be like the minority of your audience, but I think a lot of even technical founders at some point will give that up, and so they have to learn this at some point. And the biggest challenge that I have had and that our development team has had, because it's maybe my shortcoming, is getting what's in my head into a feature document with scope and wireframes and UI and a list of requirements that they can go implement and feel confident in implementing the first time without us having 8 rounds of revisions. And they're not mind readers, and I admittedly am not like great at expressing exactly what I want, but I definitely know what I want, and so that's kind of a dangerous combination. And I think that's been the most challenging thing for all of us, is to say, like, I know what I want this feature to look like. I try my best to describe that in a bunch of different ways, and that's really been the biggest thing that we've improved a lot to, where now we do it, I think, really well. But at the beginning, it was a slog, and it was a lot of misunderstandings, and it's all my fault because I just had a hard time, really describing in the level of detail and in the language that a developer can understand.
So what's your process?
And kind of be successful. Yeah, so I think for the size team, we're 5 full-time people and 3 freelancers. So for our size team, it's really robust. So I start with a really kind of plain English list of requirements of what we want to build. So say like our Headliner integration that we just released. I'll say we want to integrate with Headliner. Headliner is a tool that creates audiograms. So these will look video things with the waveforms that you see on Twitter and stuff like that. And so I say, we want to integrate with Headliner. This is what it's going to do. So when a user clicks on this button, then we open this modal and we open the Headliner app and they go do it. And that's going to return back the video URL into the Castos dashboard for that episode. And so I write this just like that in plain English. And then I go into our app and I screenshot and annotate the screenshots to say, like, the button should go here. And when you click this, it should open this other window and it should look like this. And I try to give some really, really basic wireframes of what I think things should look like. And then I have a call with a developer on our team that's going to implement this. And we just talk through it real time. And I share it with him and he asks a bunch of questions and clarifies what I've said. And I think that part goes a long way to me refining exactly what I want and being really clear about it. And then him understanding and having the confidence to go kind of implement it from there.
and then they go implement it. And then we have staging and a production environment. Everything goes on staging. We all kind of play around with it on staging, and then release it to the customers when it's ready.
So how long does that, I'm just curious, how long does that process take?
The scoping and the shaping of a feature takes a couple of days, not full time, but I kind of sit and stew on it and work on it and send it over to them, and they have questions. Then we have a call. So a couple of days, and then the feature just, however long the feature takes.
Right on. Very cool. And I'm a technical founder, so I can appreciate the the level of, or the amount of time that goes into designing features and getting them to look just right. And I also have myself, because I'm a technical founder, so usually when I want to build something, I literally start with writing code instead of wireframes or drawings or anything. And oftentimes that's not really the best way to go about it. It's having that kind of process where you kind of go through that, especially since you have a development team, is definitely valuable. Jonathan?
Yeah, we're going to go for a break, and we'll be back, and we'll be discussing with Craig all things around podcasting and why he built his product. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. We've had a good discussion so far, I feel. We've been dealing with the time delay between France and England reasonably well. So, Craig, what are some of the major surprises on this 3-year windy road of that you've gone down? What are some of the things that have come up that were a little bit of a surprise that you didn't anticipate?
Yeah, I think from a product perspective, the biggest surprise has been how difficult really good UI and UX is. We have a really wide range of customers, from super technical developers to people that don't know how to use WordPress and don't know what a podcast is but want to start one. And to build a tool that is both simple to use, and I mentioned our platform is really extensible and has a lot of kind of integrations. So the core of it needs to be really simple to use, but you need to be able to extend it really easily, both on the WordPress side with our plugin and on the hosting and the app side. And so to create an experience that people can get value from really quickly and really easily, but that power users can really come in and get a lot of value from is a really challenging thing. I think to create something that is simple is a lot harder than to create something that's complex. And we always kind of just run up against this this balance of creating a really powerful feature or a cool integration, and it being just really transparent pass through to our customers and their experience in their publishing.
That's great. Over to you, Adrian.
So you have a podcasting hosting platform. So I imagine that you either hear or see or have experience with a lot of podcasts. And I'd love to know what kind of if you were to take 3 tips out of a top hat and say that if you're not doing these things for your podcast, you're seriously missing out on potential growth. So if there are 3 things that you could pick out after seeing all of the trends from the people on your platform as well as your own podcast, what would those 3 things be in order to help potentially smaller podcasters grow their audiences?
Yeah, so I think the first one is really obvious but really hard to do, and it is to create really awesome content. Because a bad podcast, especially now here, the first part of 2020, is going to get you killed, right? So if you guys are creating the same podcast as everyone else in the WordPress space, no one is going to listen because they're going to go listen to the show they're already subscribed to, and they're not going to come check out your stuff. But if you're able to, and that's through better interviews or more dynamic content or doing things like Facebook Live, create a different podcast and different content, a different experience for your listeners, then you have a chance to be successful. So I think that's the first one. And like I said, it seems really simple, but to implement it, I think is really difficult. The second one is building a community around your podcast. So you mentioned your Facebook page or a Facebook group is even better, or a Slack channel or Discord or whatever. but somewhere to continue the discussion with your listeners in between episodes. The people that do this really well have more than a podcast, right? They have a podcast, but they really have a brand, and the podcast is a way to connect with their audience. It's not the only thing they have. And I think kind of to layer onto that is to own maybe the only thing that you own in podcasting is not like subscribers in iTunes, because iTunes could change the rules and your subscribers might not go away, but your ranking would tomorrow. And Facebook could close down Facebook groups. But to build an email list of email addresses that you own 100% and can email those people and contact them whenever you want is, I think, amazingly still here in 2020, like the most valuable marketing asset that we all have. And I think very few podcasters do a really good job of this, myself included, admittedly. I could do a lot better at this. It is being diligent and deliberate about getting in touch with your listeners through email. Again, just because Facebook and Facebook groups might just go away, who knows? But email, I don't think ever is going to go away. And
email is like the only decentralized
school when I say
right?
that, but yeah, I mean, I feel so bad when I say that, and I feel really old. But I mean, you look at tools like, I don't know if you guys remember Blab from a few years ago. Everybody thought Blab was going to be like the best thing ever, and it's going to replace podcasting, and Spotify is going to buy them, and they just went out of business like 1 week. And you're just like, holy crap! Like this is, a lot of people built their whole platform on Blab, and that's just really risky. And email is never going to go away. Yeah, it's the only truly decentralized thing. But I think podcasting is kind of like that, right? Like, your RSS feed is your RSS feed, especially if you base it like on your WordPress site, because no one's going to take away your WordPress site. And people can subscribe to your podcast directly through your RSS feed. So places like Apple Podcasts are really just search engines of RSS feeds. And so like to an extent, podcasting is really decentralized. It's not YouTube, it's not the audio version of YouTube where everything happens on YouTube. It really happens from your feed, and your feed can be listed a bunch of places like Stitcher and Google Podcast and Apple, but it still is your feed, and you could have people subscribe to your show directly without ever knowing what Apple Podcasts is.
From what you're saying, it sounds like almost, because I want to go back to where you mentioned, when you were talking about community, you need to have a place to continue the conversation for your podcast. And you said something in particular, you're really like you're not really building a podcast, you're building a brand. And I see the people that do like podcasting really, really, really well is that they don't self-identify as I do a podcast and that's my business. They really self-identify as like they have like a purpose and a mission value, just like any sort of like regular business. I help people do X and accomplish this in a set amount of time or something like that. And really the podcast serves as a channel for them to communicate with their audience, because some people prefer reading, some people prefer listening, and they're really just using podcasting as a channel. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on, do you think that it's possible to be super successful, like doing podcast only, and that's like your thing, and for whatever reason? Or do you see it like you should really be striving to sort of build out podcasting as a channel of your overall kind of like mission, purpose, value statement or whatever?
Yeah, so I definitely think it should be a part of your overall kind of repertoire. And I would ask, if you're asking this question of yourself, or the listeners are asking this question of themselves, I would ask, do you know of a podcaster that only podcasts and you don't see them on social media, or you don't get emails from them, or you don't see them on YouTube or whatever? And when I'm asking myself this, the answer is definitely no, right? Even like Joe Rogan, right? Joe Rogan is everywhere. He has a super successful podcast, and that's definitely like the thing, but he does everything else as well. And I would say as you get more niche and less mass market, like Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss or something, that the need to connect with your audience where they want to consume content and how they want to consume content gets even more important, because you can't just alienate 30% of your audience. Right. By only doing a podcast, or 70% of your audience by only doing a podcast. But I think the other thing to consider, again, like going back to content and like creating really good content, is podcasting in the audio medium lends itself to some really interesting conversations that aren't good for like written format or aren't good for video. And so I think if you look at like, how do I want to create this piece of content that I have in my mind, it might be at best for a podcast and it might not. So to only do a podcast, I think you're missing out on some of the stories you can tell, some of the ways you can engage with and provide value to your listeners that might be better in another medium.
So it's really, so I guess the lesson to take away from it is like, you know, it's all well and good to like want to start a podcast, but there needs to be some sort of like higher level purpose that you can use podcasting as a channel to distribute that knowledge and information and the wealth that you have to offer, and not to sort of distance yourself from possibly going down other roads as well. You know, videos, YouTube, blogging, all of the other channels that exist in order to communicate with people.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Jonathan?
Yes, we're going to wrap up the podcast part of the show. Craig's agreed to stay on, and we're going to have some bonus content. I'm going to be asking Craig what's the difference between podcasting and having a YouTube channel, and also that he's part of the incubator that Rob Whaling has developed and how helpful that was. So it should be an interesting continuance of the discussion, which you'll be able to see and listen to on the WP-Tonic website. Craig, what's the best way for people to learn more about you and your product?
Yeah, so we're at castos.com, CASTOS, and you can go over there and check us out there. Send us a message. We'd love to chat. Just mention that you saw us here on WP-Tonic Podcast, and we'd love to chat with anybody if you have any questions about podcasting, both technical and how do I do this, or content and strategy perspective. We love helping folks out both ways there.
And Craig's been really generous. He, for the WP-Tonic tribe, if you're interested in podcasting, he's offered 50% off the normal rate, and that 50% applies for the first 3 months. So I think that's an excellent offer. To get that, he's given us the coupon code WP-Tonic, all lowercase, and that will be in the show notes. So if you don't worry, folks, if you need to see it up, I'll make sure it's in the show notes. Adrian, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
So when we were talking about channels and things that podcasters can do better, one of the things that Craig mentioned was building an email list. But building an email list can be expensive sometimes. There's lots of solutions out there, and and some of them are quite costly, especially when you get up to when you start doing those monthly fees. Now, Groundhog, which is my company, offers you a solution to install a complete CRM and marketing automation tool suite directly on your WordPress website, so you can start building your email list for essentially $0. You can go to groundhog with 2gs.io to find out more about how you can get started.
And like I said, Adrian's product is fantastic. Also, if you want to support the show, go over to the WP-Tonic website and join our newsletter list. I've revamped it. It's going to have a new look. At the end of March, anybody that joins in February to March, any new subscriber, one of you is going to win a prize up to $100 as a little thank you, and we're going to announce the winner at the last show of March. So go over to the WP-Tonic website and sign up for our newsletter. So we're going to wrap up the show. It's been a great discussion. Remember, you can listen to more of our discussion with Craig by going to the WP-Tonic website. We'll be back next week with another fantastic guest, or we'll have an internal discussion between me and Adrian around a subject that will help you be more successful in your WordPress business in 2020. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye. So on to bonus content. So how do you see this divide between podcasting and running a YouTube channel? Because a lot of people that approach me with some questions get very confused about which one they should start up? And I haven't got a really great answer myself, because I have a YouTube channel and it's got about 1,700 subscribers, but for the podcast I get between 4,000 to 5,000 downloads per month. So how do you explain it yourself to people that approach you, Craig?
Yeah, I think that it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with that some content is better for audio and some content is better for video. We're doing more and more video for our YouTube channel for Castos, but we repurpose our audio content to YouTube, but that's not like a video first format. Things like screencasts or talking head like me explaining something is better for YouTube and video, but I think typically podcasts are better just on audio, just because that's where and how people consume them more. So that's kind of the question I ask myself. Is like, for this thing I want to do, should it be a podcast episode? Should it be a blog post? Should it be YouTube? Or should it be like a social media post? And just kind of decide from there.
But because I kind of repurposing is fantastic, isn't it? But I don't think I get as much from the YouTube channel if I spent a bit more time and it was one of my things that was on my 2020 list and I've been failing, but I bought some new equipment and I'm determined that I'm going to change my ways in March and actually get stuck in. But so I think repurposing is fine, but also you need to provide some unique content if you're going to be serious about the YouTube channel. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I think doing really good video is much harder than doing really good audio for a podcast, because you have to get the audio right and it has to sound good, and you have to get the lighting and the video and the backdrop and all this kind of stuff. And you can't mess up, right? Because editing audio is really easy. Editing video and it seeming kind of seamless and fluid is really hard. If you make a mistake or if you move wrong or something, you can't just cut it here and pick it up over there. So I think video is much harder, and probably the reason that people shy away from it. Also because your face is online and that's weird for some people. I think to hear your voice the first time is really weird. But to hear your voice and see your face at the same time is I don't know.
Oh, I've got over that. I've got over that, Craig. Over to you, Adrian.
So I'd like to talk about YouTube a little bit more. I from what we were talking about, it really sounds like you should probably be doing both in order to, as you said, reach your audience where they want to be reached. I mean, part of my daily routine is I go home and I just like turn on Chromecast and I see what's on the feed and if there's anything worthy of watching. I'm not much. I mean, I'm on a podcast, but I have to be honest, I don't listen to them very often. I'll listen.
You don't listen to our podcast.
I'm on it. I listen to it live. But
the secrets are coming out, listeners and viewers.
I'm the same way. Yeah.
I'm not much. I don't listen to a lot of other people's podcasts unless there's like very specific information that I want in it. So I spend more time on YouTube than I do listening to podcasts, like quantifiably, for sure. So it really sounds like if you have the bandwidth, it sounds like you should be doing both. But again, as you mentioned, it's like super hard to create good quality video. And there's so much content that you're fighting for on YouTube. Because if you have a podcast, it's like you own your domain. It's either on the website, and they're going there and they have to like navigate to you on Spotify or on iTunes. So it's kind of like you own that domain, but when you're in YouTube, it's like a whole other base, because you're essentially at that point fighting for people in the feed, right?
Yep.
I'm not sure how much experience you have with YouTube, but do you have any suggestions for podcasters that are learning or that are trying to start creating an audience on YouTube? Do you have any suggestions for them on how they can differentiate their content in the feed in order to kind of like boost their success rate a little bit earlier?
Geez, this is honestly a bit outside of my kind of domain, but what I would say is, you kind of have to think about, like, some people just like watching video more than they like watching audio or listening to audio, and vice versa, right? Like, For me, back when I was working my day job and trying to do all this stuff on the side, I was in sales. So I was in the car driving around hours every day. And so podcasts was just natural. I consumed a ton of podcasts and almost no video. Now I work at a computer all day. I consume a lot more video than I do podcasts. And so I think, again, to alienate one or the other is not really fair. So like if you're creating content, try to make it both. And so what I would do if I was really serious about YouTube is, like you guys do here, create native video for my podcast episodes and put it on YouTube as a video. Because then people that want to watch a video of your content can, and it's not just like a static image with audio in the background. It's actually you two on a Zoom call, or us three on a Zoom call on YouTube.
They get to see all of Jonathan's funny faces.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I would do. And in terms of making it stand out, I don't know anything about kind of gaming the YouTube system, and I'm sure it's just as hard as gaming anything else. But I would just kind of go back to like, get people off of YouTube and onto your domain, get them onto your email list, get them into your social media or whatever, that you can contact them, that it's not like you were talking about, Adrian, you're at the mercy of the YouTube feed algorithm, right? When you go home and turn on Chromecast, it's not you who's deciding, or the people that you like listening to. It's not them pushing stuff to you. It's you kind of receiving in a really passive way whatever YouTube serves up to you. So however you can get more control over that, to say like, if you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, you get an announcement when a new video goes live, or if you're on my email list, I'll email you when a new video goes live, or something like that, to try to take some control back.
Right. I think necessity, like the overall necessity we're talking about here, is like control. And if you don't own anything, then your podcast is essentially kind of like worth the hours that you put into it, even if that. But if you have a domain and you're able to like build a list, and you're able to control the start point of how they consume your information, then that's where you start to move beyond just being a podcaster, and now you actually have a business. Yeah.
So also about YouTube listeners and viewers, a previous show 337, we had a special guest, Sean Cornell, and he runs a great YouTube channel that tells you how to build up a YouTube channel, and I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes that will take you there, and you can listen to his advice. Let's go on. So basically, a few weeks we had Rob Whaling on the show for an interview, and he's coming back on the show in March as a guest on my Roundtable show. So you're part of his incubator, is that correct, Craig? And if it is, how much have you learnt, and how beneficial has it been being part of Rob's incubator?
Yeah, so Castos is part of the first batch of the Tiny Seed program, incubator. I think they use the term accelerator, but I think it's all the same thing, give or take. And it's been really great. Yeah, it's been really great to have access to people like Rob and all the other mentors there, and learn a lot about running a successful SaaS business, marketing, operations, product even, and it's been really great. There's 10 companies in this first batch. I know they're in the process of, they've already taken applications. They're selecting the second batch as we speak, and the program is a year long. So it's a lot longer than a typical accelerator incubator that's something like 90 days. Y Combinator being like the most popular probably. And I think where Tiny Seed really is different than a lot of accelerators is, I think Rob's tagline is like, it's a remote startup accelerator for bootstrappers. And so there's two things there that are really unique. One is it's remote. So I live in France. Our company is based in the US. And so our team is in 4 different continents. And so we're definitely a very like remote first team, and all the companies in Tiny Seed are remote. So that's unique as opposed to, again, something like 500 Startups or Y Combinator. And the other is that it's for bootstrappers. So when you get on the
kind of the real venture capital train, you can't get off because the expectation is you go into Y Combinator with the goal of raising a seed round at the end, and then an A round, and then a B round, and then go public or sell for $1 bajillion. Whereas the goal for a lot of companies in the tiny seed cohort, at least this first one, is, take a bit of investment to further the business and get better product market fit or grow your market share or something like that, and then continue to run the business like you want. That might be go raise a bunch more money and get a seed round and an A round or something like that. But it might be to run the business more like a bootstrapper would and run a profitable, self-sufficient business. And so I think those two things are really where tiny seed is different, and they're both really well aligned with me and what I want. I don't want to go raise a whole ton of venture capital money and all the pressure and expectations and giving up control of my company that goes along with that. And I love being a remote company and living where I want to live and traveling like we do and all these kinds of things. I think there's definitely challenges to running a remote company and being a part of a remote company, but there's a ton of benefits. And I think we're just going to see it get more and more popular.
So what, after let's say the first 1 to 2 months, is there anything that comes to mind that you learnt in that first month or 2 months that really kind of, that moment, I just didn't realize that still sticks in your mind about joining the incubator?
Yeah. So, and just for reference, we're about 10 months into it at this point, 9 or 10 months. So we're almost done. And I joke that we all are going to need like a halfway house to go to afterwards, because there's been so much support within the group. We have a really active Slack channel. And afterwards, we're still going to be a part of that community, but we'll be kind of on our own, and they're going to have another cohort coming in, and they're going to focus on them. But I think the biggest thing that we learned, and it might be different from some other companies, is like we joined Tiny Seed as a relatively established company. I think we have product market fit. We're growing. We were profitable going into it, and we took a bit of investment just to grow faster. The thing that is really hard to learn, because I don't have any experience with it as a bootstrapper, is I've always had to watch our funds really closely and say, like, I can only spend this much money on people or on AdWords or on designers or whatever. And then you get an amount of investment, and the goal is to spend that as best you can, not as quickly as you can, like real venture money, but like if you take $100,000 of investment, you should spend that money as best you can and as quickly as you can, as long as it makes sense. Because if you can't and don't spend that money, then you've given up a part of your company for nothing, so you give up some percentage of your company to join the incubator and get this money. And then if you don't use that money to invest in your business, then you've given up that percentage of your company for nothing. But this is like spending ahead of your revenue is a really foreign thing to all of us, because we all run, bootstrap businesses, and I have $10,000 in the bank. I can do this month. But then all of a sudden you have $100,000 in the bank, and you're like, wow, I need to think about like how I'm going to spend this and what our burn rate is, burn rate being like how much more are you spending than you're bringing in every month. And so like how to kind of project that burn rate to where you get back to break even or profitable before you run out of money is an interesting thing.
Oh, over to you, Adrian.
I'm trying to think of. I'm honestly just trying to think of like a follow-up question to that. I run a bootstrap business, and I was fortunate to receive a little bit of family and friends money at the very beginning that allowed me to launch this venture. And I mean, I can speak to the whole bootstrap, you're watching, it's like, okay, well, payroll is this much per month and I have to make payroll. So, what other money can I use to invest in, either to like going to conferences and like advertising, which I don't do any of, so that's not really a problem. But I totally understand that. Do you have how did you make that mindset shift to looking at and what do you think is valuable about learning to kind of like take risks on the money that you have, maybe spending ahead of things. And has that ever gotten you into any trouble?
Not yet. No, we're fortunate that our revenue is growing and we're, back to being a pretty much break-even company at this point. The thing that it does is it just takes and moves you forward in time a certain amount. So you're at $10,000 a month in MRR, you take this investment and you act like you're at $20,000 a month, right? Because you're spending $10,000 extra a month. So you hire a marketer, you start spending on AdWords, you hire a designer, and you do things really ahead of where your true revenue is. And that's, for me, that's just kind of how I looked at it, is like, in a year, when I run out of money or when I spend this money, we should be here. And to get there, I need to do these things. And that's just kind of how I looked at it, is like, okay, when we're, doing the revenue I want to be doing in a year, what do we need to look like? And how do we get from here to there?
What do we need to be in order to sustain all of the investments that I've made?
Yep.
And I'm surmising, though, to round up, Rob, is that Rob and his team of advisors, that they give you advice on that. That's another part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a huge part. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly the amount of money that the a thing like Tiny Seed gives you, for a lot of people is enough for, like Adrian, you were talking about, you receive some friends and family money for your personal runway. And there's, of the 10 companies in Tiny Seed this year, 7 or 8 of them are using the money just to pay themselves salary. And they're developers and designers, and they're building the tool, and it's all by themselves. For companies that have some degree of product market fit, it's to kind of bridge that gap. And then there's companies like ours that just use it to grow faster. But yeah, Jonathan, you're absolutely right. Like, the biggest value they give you is not the money, it's the mentorship and the guidance. And from Rob and Einar and Tracy directly, the 3 people that Rob and Einar are the partners, then Tracy kind of runs the program on a day-to-day basis. It's the guidance and the counseling and the support, the emotional support sometimes they give you. And then their network of all the advisors directly in Tiny Seed, or those like second and third tier friends and advisors and people in the space. I mean, I have access to, you think about like the best of the best people in a lot of these spaces. We have access to them, not anytime we want, but we can get access to people like Jason Fried if we want to. And it's an amazing resource. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much, Craig. So I think we're going to wrap up the bonus content. Craig's been generous with his time. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this interview, and hopefully you found it useful and interesting. If you did, give us a remark on our Facebook page or contact me directly. It's always great to hear from the listeners and viewers. We'll be back next week, folks. Bye.
Bye.